much for your time. So the first question is, what is your name and what relation do you have to this pit, please?
Right, my name is Phil Johnson. I started at the number 2 side in 1981, and then in 1985-86 I moved across to the number 4 side. I was employed at Barra Colliery in Worsborough as an electrician. I was promoted to electrical shift charge engineer and moved to this site. This site, when I was here, this were our offices as such. We had the electrical office, the electric shop, the electrical underground deployment. Then on the top there were the deputy engineers' offices for the mechanical and the under manager. So it was a small site, very compact. We had the 2 shafts that you can see, the caps. One were the left hand side were a pumping shaft, and the right hand side were actually plated over, and we used to use it as a car park. So the pumping from the old oak shaft happened every day, and we knew if the pumps weren't working because the water would ingress into our main shaft here, and we'd all get wet through when we were riding the shaft. So we wanted to make sure that the pumps were working and everything. Here would have been a fitting shop, and there was the welding shop, and over there were a compressor house. That area at the back were actually the main fan that pulled the air from the pit out, so the fresh air went in at Barra in Worsborough, and it actually came out here. So it had a long way to come. The scene we were working at the time was the egg mower. So we went down this shaft, and the egg mower were actually off that way. And then once we'd done with the egg mower, we drifted down and then came round, and we were actually trying to avoid the oaks area because we knew that the bodies were still underground, and for respect we went all the way around them and left them where they were undisturbed. Saying that, there were people actually saw bodies coming across, guys in flat caps and things, walking across old roadways. So there was a bit of activity underground with things like that. It was a great pit to work at. It was very small. There was nothing really other than the shaft, the fan, and the services that we got here. We were like a satellite. We used to send stuff underground. All this were rail track going into the shaft. The insets that we had were the main inset at the bottom, which took us to the egg mower, and then halfway down the shaft we got the Kent inset, which were no longer worked and had the reputation of having Gimpy, the ghost, in. So they're always interesting on a night, 2 o'clock in the morning, going into the Kent seam on your own and listening for the air doors and thinking, if the air doors go, I'm away. So, what else to say about the site? It was very homely. That's the only thing I can say. Coming from Barra, which were a massive site, coming here, it was very homely. There were an electrical shift charge engineer, a mechanical shift charge engineer, a couple of fitters, a couple of electricians, and we all worked together as a team. The main thing we got over there in that area were a methane house. So we were pumping all the methane, because the Barra were working the Silkstone seam, which were very gassy. So we brought all the gases up here into the methane house. So the main thing was looking after the methane house. If that stopped, the pit would stop. Interesting things that went off. I can remember once being sat in the office and a guy come across, who walked across here, and he just says, "I've just put a bomb in your fan house." What? He says, "It's very lax security on this site, so I've put a bomb in your fan house." At that, we had to convey that to Barra Colliery, to the control room, who stopped all operations, because if the fan went, everything went, with no air down the pit. So we had to send for the police. The police came doing searches across site and things like that. And I can remember walking to the fan house and the police officer said to me, "Do you think he could have put it in that control box?" So I opened the control box, forgetting that there was an alarm on it. So as I opened the box, this 150 decibel alarm went off. I don't know who run fastest, me or the policeman. So I didn't actually, but that's fine. My role as I started working in 1973 as an apprentice electrician on Barra surface. And as an apprentice electrician, all we learnt is how to manhandle trailing cables, to load them onto spinners, onto things. The trailing cables were probably that diameter and covered in sludge and slime, and so I did 6 months actually loading trailing cables, and then started underground as an apprentice electrician. I was given to an electrician who sadly passed now, who looked after me closely. I had to spend 20 days with him under close personal supervision underground, and it's a strange experience underground. It's hot, dusty, wet, cold, everything that can happen, it's there underground, and it's got a peculiar smell to it all the time. You know, every ex-miner you speak to will tell you about that smell, and it never disappears.
What could you liken the smell to? Is there anything you think it smells like?
A musty old cellar is the nearest I've ever smelt that's somewhat similar to that. You've got that constant smell all the time, and then you've got the dust and everything that's going off. And it's funny because you develop a sixth sense. You start to get a feeling if something's not right when you're underground. You hear little pieces, what we used to call bitting, little pieces falling off the roof. That meant get out of the way, because there were going to be a roof fall and things like that. It was strange how you build it up, you know, and I soon found that, and then I started on face training. So once I got to 18, I was allowed onto the coal face. That is different altogether. When you're on for 7¼ hours, crawling up and down on your hands and knees. You know, I can remember my first week on coal face training. My knees, they were like radiators. They were hot. I like, knee pad straps all cut into the back of my legs and things like that. My hands were just hard. Calluses all over the place, you know. So I spent a couple of weeks face training and went on to shifts working underground as an apprentice. Came out of my time after 4 years, then started the real stuff as electrician. We were responsible for everything electrical underground, and we got from 12 volts up to 3,300 volts. So a big range of equipment. Most of this equipment were heavy duty, so we got used to handling big switch gears and things like that. I did maybe about 4 years as electrician, mainly working on coal faces. Because I was young, I was still fit enough to work on the coal face. I then moved into development, which is where the 30 to 40 degree centigrade temperatures came in. So you would go down the pit dressed in big clothes, big coats on, donkey jackets, and then get to the districts, strip off and put on a pair of shorts and Wellingtons. And then, so you're working in water, it was 30 to 40 degrees, you come out at the end of the shift and pour the sweat out of your Wellingtons.
That didn't sound. Why were Wellingtons important down the mine? Was it?
Because it was water, we had water on the floor. There were places where it was wet on the floor and wet on the top. So you got a constant rain, but it's salty water. You knew if you got a cut on your hand or things like that. You know, just imagine putting your hand in salty water all the time. It's like, you find every cut on your body when you're working in that stuff. So you just, and then come out at end of shift, put your big clothes back on and go back out into cold. Then you used to wonder why you got colds and coughs and things like that. But the thing about being at Eddings is I loved it because of the comradeship with the Edding people. You know, the Edding guys that were on it were just second to none. They looked after me and I looked after them as part of my job as electrician. Then I was lucky enough to be promoted to electrical shift charge engineer. So then my duties were not so much the hands-on. We got shifts of up to 30 electricians to look after. So we used to deploy, spend this time looking at plans and things like that, and moving. You're forever moving things. So as a district became worked out, you'll move that stuff and put it onto a new district. So it was just a continuous move. So we had to arrange all that, and then you got the normal breakdowns and things. We used to have I mean, not at this pit, but at the number 4 side and at Barra, we had a control room where we had everything in. You know, you would have the cameras looking underground at transfer points and things. So that we spent a lot of time in the control rooms. Basically because all the information were coming in, we could get everybody on the phones and things. We could respond to breakdowns. For me to get from here to the district where the breakdown might have been a good hour. Walking and riding and paddy riding and things like that. So a lot of times we had to try and work out how to get the thing working via telephone, using the electricians underground type thing. It was interesting, really interesting, and a great life. And I found it really strange when back in '92 we were filling this shaft. So that was my last job here, filling that shaft full of concrete. Soul destroying. When you spent all your life, or your working life up to that point, working in these places, seeing all different things, running cables down and things like that, and all of a sudden you're chopping them and putting concrete into it, and it's finished. You know, the winder itself, I could actually drive that winder because we were taught how to drive it just in case there were a strike by the winders or whatever. So I've seen pictures of it now, how it stands, and you know, the copper thieves have been in and the brass thieves, and they've nicked all the handles and things like that. They're big nice brass knobs on and things. So at that point in '92 I decided that I couldn't stand it anymore. I didn't particularly like dangling in shafts anyway. You know, I've got an harness on, I've got a chain on, but when you look down and all you can see is a big black hole underneath you. Yeah, no, it wasn't for me. So I decided to move on, and I went to outside industry and found it difficult to adapt. Here, if we had a problem, we would sort it. We might fall out. You know, we would be shouting and screaming at each other, find a solution. 20 minutes later, arms around each other. Come on, let's get on with it. We're big men, that's it. As soon as I went to outside industry, I wasn't allowed to do this, I wasn't allowed to do that, I couldn't do this, that wasn't politically correct, this and I'm like, oh. So I did struggle to adapt on the outside, but I did another 25 years working as an engineering manager before I retired. So, but it's nice to come back and see this. I just imagine what the engineers would have said about the graffiti. It was a difficult site to try and secure, to be quite honest with you. They used to come up and pinch cables and things like that. So it's nice to see it being used for something other than just let and rip to pieces. I only wish now we'd have known what was going to happen and we could have kept these places so that people could have gone inside, you know, and had a look and seen what that was. The buildings here, all nice old buildings, you know, but everything, we didn't think about that. We didn't think that anybody wanted to be interested. When I left school to start in mining, we were probably seen as we got nowhere else to work. You know, I got 5 other jobs, but I decided to come into mining because it was for life. My brother were in mining; he was an electrical engineer. My cousin was an under manager. My other cousin was a senior overman. I had an uncle who was an overman, so it was in his blood anyway. You know, all my family were in mining, and we saw it as best apprenticeship available, and as I said, a job for life. It's hard sometimes. You look around and people say, "Well, you're a miner," and they're interested. You think, and we just took it for granted. It was just something we did, you know. But as I say, if we'd have known what we know now, there were a lot of stuff that we just threw away. We could have kept it all for future generations to look at. So I've actually fetched a piece of paper with me today from